It was once an affordable housing complex. Now tenants say rising rents from the new owner of Southwoods Village are forcing people to leave. Tonight, why some say what's happening there is one of many reasons Alberta should revamp its renting rules.
That one was our eviction notice.
Renter Riley Sikora can barely keep track of the correspondence he's had with the new owners of his townhome. In less than a month, he says he was threatened with eviction and received 2 different rent hike notices.
It kind of feels like they are trying to get money anywhere they can.
He says it started with a notice about a new pet fee that he contested because he paid a pet deposit when he first moved in. He also pushed back on paying rent through a new portal system, requiring his banking information.
And then just a few days after that phone call, I got the email saying it was going to be getting a new notice, and then they sent this notice just a little while later with a $350 utility fee.
The previous pet fee, gone from the new notice, replaced with a utility fee. Shauna Ashton also received a notice of a new utility fee, despite the recent discovery of mold in her basement,
which aggravated our daughter's asthma.
In an area prone to flooding.
It comes pouring in right here.
Ashton says the former owner knew about the flooding and didn't fix the problem. The new owner, a group called Live Trio, has promised improvements. But until then, Ashton doesn't believe her family should be asked to pay more.
That doesn't make sense to me, that you would front load these costs on the current residents as opposed to amortizing it over the next few years.
It sucks because a lot of the people in here can barely afford where we're at now, let alone I'm getting a $400 increase. Some of my neighbors were getting $500 and more increases.
Both Sikora and Ashton are on month-to-month agreements, meaning as long as they haven't seen a rent increase in the past year, the landlord can ask for one with 90 days notice. Fees, however, are more of a gray area.
The thing that is tricky is that the Residential Tenancies Act doesn't actually mention fees.
While rent regulations are provincial, the city offers support to tenants with questions about their rights. Caitlin Beaton says while there is no section about fees in the legislation, what's known as common law applies, which is essentially the precedent set by past court cases.
So the landlord can determine, but fees also need to be considered reasonable and reflect the actual costs.
Courts are informed by that if they need to interpret something in the legislation that isn't clear, but that's not obvious to people who aren't lawyers.
Laura Buckingham is with the Alberta Law Reform Institute, a group that investigates Alberta laws and recommends changes if needed. It's in the middle of reviewing the Residential Tenancies Act.
It's been about 20 years since the legislation was last reviewed. That was the last sort of top to bottom review of the act.
Buckingham says while the group still has a long way to go, it's already identified many gaps. For example, she says the act doesn't discuss electronic payment, short-term rentals such as Airbnbs, or even what to do when dealing with more than one tenant. As well, she says there is no straightforward way to fight something like an unreasonable fee or rent increase.
We routinely monitor all of our acts and we update them as required.
The minister says an amendment was just made earlier this month about electronic communication. He advises anyone having issues with a landlord to take to the Residential Tenancy Dispute Resolution Service. It provides a low-cost way for tenants and landlords to settle disputes.
Because that is the avenue of if they're being treated unfairly.
In past cases, the quasi-judicial tribunal has found a landlord targeted a tenant with a rent increase that was essentially an economic eviction. But fighting a rent hike or fee isn't listed as options a tenant can bring to the service.
It would really help to have some clear guidance in the legislation about how people can raise these kinds of issues.
Ashton says several of her neighbors packed up and left right after receiving the rent hike notices.
Because people didn't know what to do.
She says the tight-knit community is being ripped apart. Live Trio did not respond to my requests for comment. For more information about who owns properties and what condition those properties are in, the city has plans to create a landlord registry. More on that in my next segment.